you know, because you've signed up for it, they are going to speak about climate change and the role of education. So they'll speak for a while, and we hope there'll be a little time of questions. But we'll get cracking and look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you. Mark Charlesworth, I'm the warm-up act for Sarah. So I'll give a sort of a context to sort of education, give a broad overview. Everybody hear me okay? Yes. Yeah. And then Sarah will look at some detail related to the Pacific. I'll warn you, my dancing is nothing like as good as earlier, so I'll give you an attempt. So, context, education overview, and a little look at current research. So, there's lots of potential starting places for context, but I think Agenda 21 is a good starting place. We'll also want to connect a little bit, as already done, climate to other issues, and given the nature of the occasion, a little bit on philosophy and theology from my part. So, sustainable development, the key sustainable development document introduced as International Soft Law in 1992. In that document, education appears 250 times, whereas religion only appears 8 times. And there's a specific chapter dedicated to education. So just to give a flavour of it, reinforcing values that support sustainable consumption, governments and private sector organisations should promote more positive attitudes to sustainable consumption through education. Remember, this is 1992. To be effective, environment and development education should deal with the dynamics of both the physical, biological, and socio-economic environment, and the human, which may include spiritual development, should be integrated into all disciplines and should employ formal and non-formal methods of and effective communication. Governments should strive to update or prepare strategies aimed at integrating environment and development as a cross-cutting issue into education at all levels within the next 3 years. And we've been trying to do that, and different organisations have made different attempts, but it's, we were set an agenda, and there's lots of other aspects of the agenda that we haven't achieved, and this is another one. So, but just to give a flavour of where we got to. Educational authorities with the appropriate assistance from community groups, so thinking sort of religious congregations or non-governmental organisations, are recommended to assist or set up pre-service and in-service training programmes for all teachers, administrators and educational planners, as well as non-formal educators in all sectors, addressing the nature and methods of environmental and development education, making use of relevant. To in a sense, all that we need to know about so many of these things were said in 1992 in international soft law. Relevant authorities should ensure that every school is assisted by designing environmental activity work plans with the participation of students and staff. So it's all relatively straightforward, and we should have been making progress. Isn't time to unpack why. Just to sort of connect climate change with sort of other aspects. This is a diagram of planetary boundaries. I've chosen this diagram, which I worked around a lot. I've chosen this diagram in particular because there are 3 question marks. So for climate change, people that sort of develop this research believe they have an idea of what where the limits are. It's quite a belief that I would question, and there's elements of Mark's talk this morning that would raise questions about that. But the key thing is that climate change is connected to a range of different issues which need to be considered together. Donuts. So what Kate Rawworth did on top of the previous diagram, the different issues she brought into sort of social science, social justice questions. So there's ways of thinking through these things that are make sense, but are that's had some traction with policymakers, but not a lot. This is more challenging for policymakers, so it's had sort of less traction, is probably fair to say, so far. Another sort of key aspect of the nature of climate and environmental issues is tipping points. So sea otters, for those that don't know, if you take sea otters out of kelp forests die. Similarly with bee stings, if somebody has an anaphylactic shock response to, so tipping points exist in the world. An avalanche, you can probably figure that one out. That one's a more sort of, I'd be surprised if anybody could identify that. That's when fortunately it was a cargo 747, a couple of engines fell off and it fell on an Amsterdam apartment block. Fortunately again it was Friday night so most people were out and that was literally the engines fell off, so to assume that we can predict and control our own constructions, let alone creation, to use a not a relevant term. A diagram of potential tipping points from about 10 years ago, and about half of those were fairly clear that we're already crossing. So, things are moving quite quickly, so education and responses in general to climate change need to sort of address that. Bringing things sort of more locally, education related, I was fortunate enough to be asked to speak at St Peter at Gout's school, which is about where that arrow is. So this is a map of Lincoln, so we're about there. St Peter at Gout's, as I understand it, is a Lincolnshire term for drain. So it was a church that was sort of in or next to the drain. So one of the things that the teacher specifically asked me to make clear to the students, and these were infant school, of how important, how significant this could be. So that's flooding in 2007, Stamp End. Anybody want to guess where that is, Brayford? Basically where we're stood now. So that was river flooding. That wasn't sort of climate change particularly necessarily related, but making clear that the landscape of Lincolnshire and Lincoln is vulnerable. Another thing potentially for sort of not unconnected to religious organisations, local refugees, large parts of Lincolnshire, and it could be worse than that. Just to give just a taste, a flavour of sort of philosophy and religion. This is a quotation from a book published by the edited by the Alliance of Religion and Conservation in 2003, published of all organisations by the World Bank. So I'll read it out. Imagine you're busy planting a tree and someone rushes up to you to say the Messiah has come and the end of the world is nigh. What do you do? The advice given by the rabbis in a traditional Jewish story is that you first finish planting the tree, then and only then you go and see what the news. You interpret it cynically, but I won't. The Islamic tradition has a similar story which reminds followers that if they happen to be carrying a palm pudding in their hand when the day of judgment takes place, they should not forget to plant the pudding. So the point that I'm making here, and 2 points. The agreement between those two religious traditions, it's broader than that, is important. But religious organisations have guidance that can assist us in ways that economics cannot, when we're struggling to predict and things are perilous. Greta Thunberg, I spelled that wrong, apologies. Greta, once we start to act, hope is everywhere. Instead of looking for hope, look for action. Actions will give us hope, and that's what picks up on themes from earlier. So don't be paralysed or despondent, act. We'll talk about more afterwards if you want. Consider rules and maybe values, but do the right thing the best you can. So another sort of relevant quotation from theology and philosophy. Thus a running horse be blind, the faster it run, the more heavily it will fall, and the more grievously will it be hurt. But basically, not been researched, but I would say underpins the proportionate principle for those that know that. So, as far as I'm concerned, we cannot predict and control the planet. We anticipate Baker wanted. So not economics, not reads. All the world religions, my research suggests that they wouldn't sort of favour economic policy process. Not rules. Rules can tell us, can't tell us how to build a cathedral of New Sales and not to build it. For those that don't know, the Dean of Bristol Abbey many years ago, does the name Horace Dammers mean anything to you? Basically, he wrote a book in 1982, so this is 10 years, called, no, I won't put the link, we're having, basically the motto is, live simply that others may simply live. And that again sort of goes to the earlier slides. And for those that are sort of active in ministry, I would strongly encourage you to challenge prosperity theology, Gospels. Jesus in particular is not a fan of people accumulating wealth. So, that sort of context, education overview. Process is slow, as I've already indicated. Last year, Sarah organised, my name's on there somewhere, it was all Sarah's doing, an international symposium on climate change in education. Wide range of research across all age range, disciplines and models. There's lots of good research out there that could be taken up and people are wanting to do. The sort of the key take-home message, as far as I'm concerned, is that education can be effective, even if what's perfect can be contested, but it's not a magic bullet. So, sort of going back to the beginning, the aims of Agenda 21 was sound. So, bringing me on to sort of Sarah's research, just a sort of summary of the latest on climate change in education. Complexity and scale. Climate change relates to a variety of atmospheric, meteorological. There's a whole range of complexity that education needs to sort of engage with. Lack of training and professional development opportunities for teachers in a whole range of ways, and sort of going on with this more sort of systematic fear of being controversial, lack of interest to specific topics, either by individual teachers or sort of there isn't the structural encouragement to address these issues. So it's down often to the particular enthusiasms of particular teachers. Getting these sort of things into the curriculum. Climate change and environmental questions can be brought into a whole range of different disciplines, but getting it in there, organising to get it in there, takes effort that often teachers don't immediately have. So that's broadly sort of the overview picture. Over to Sarah to talk about a specific programme.
Okay, thanks Mark. So building on from Mark's talk there, I'm not really going to talk more about theory or what we've done in research, but we've done a lot of research to support what activities we've done. I'm going to be more about what we've done running around screaming in the Pacific, doing stuff around education and different projects. So I'm going to first of all talk about Tuvalu. I first started working in Tuvalu in 2003. I'm going to tell you later about projects that we're running in all 15 of these countries simultaneously, but I want to focus on Tuvalu for a start. So in 2003, between 2003 and 2010, we were doing a lot of work around awareness. And just to show you, I mean, the guys this morning illustrated perfectly how vulnerable, both vulnerability and resilience of the Pacific Islands region. But this is Funafuti. This is a capital atoll of Tuvalu, okay? Tuvalu is 26 square kilometres of land, over 1 million square kilometres of ocean. Okay, it's tiny. The shot on the next slide is Funafuti. That is around about 9 square, that's a strip, a 9 kilometre strip. So this is Funafuti. There's around about 10,500 to 11,500 people live on there, depending who's in and who's out. And it's got population densities as high as, downtown Hong Kong, basically. So it's got quite a lot of people living in a very small area. Okay, when I learned at university about climate change, I was always thinking about waves washing over the shore and like intrusion from rivers and the sea. But in Tuvalu, it's a coral atoll, so it's porous. So the sea quite literally bubbles through the land. Okay, this is a shot of the airstrip that you can see on that top photo. So this airstrip here is what it looks like at a high tide of only 3.6 metres. Any tide of over 3 metres and you get some degree of flooding. This is also a shot of the airstrip, and funnily enough, the first place to flood is this building. You can't quite see it because it was dawn, but this is all flooded area, and this place here, that's a meteorological office, so that's the first place to flood, which I think is quite ironic. What you see there, that's a pig pen in the Pacific. Everybody loves the pigs, so in Tuvalu, every family keeps pigs. This is a deluxe pig pen with pool. But I use this to illustrate, this is the sea, this is the water table. This isn't a high tide, that's just normal. You can see, any time you do that, you're going to get flooding. So incredibly vulnerable situation. So we did, I was working with an NGO at the time called Alone for Tuvalu, and we did a project called Small is Beautiful. And we did a lot of work around renewable energy and awareness raising around climate change, a lot of work with kids, a lot of informal education, and I've actually got some of the comic books, if anybody's interested. I brought some with me. We did comic books that were translated into 14 different languages, telling the story of a kid in Tuvalu and a kid in Europe. And so we like paired off schools and things like that. So I've just got some general shots of projects that we did. We did a lot around biogas energy, because obviously there's a lot of pigs, and pigs do a lot of poo, and then we can turn that into gas so that people can cook. And to make sure that it's sustainable in terms of not actually bringing stuff into the island, we designed the biogas tanks out of water tanks, rotomold water tanks, so that we didn't have to import stuff, and it was like nice and sustainable within Tuvalu's means, because it's just basically a tank of poo, so it's not a lot of things that can go wrong. This is a gas stove. This is a gas stove run by the biogas people cooking, preparing meals and things like that. So, okay, the spirit of Tuvalu, the spirit of the Pacific. Instead of crying about the land flooding, what do? Have a festival. That's what we'll do. So these are all things that are around the first King Tide Festival in 2010. We trained with Red Cross kids, youth group, went out, did dramas. We trained them how to use cameras and said, go and film what you're going to miss when it's flooded. We showed those to kids in the UK, and we did a joint exhibition at Mansfield Museum, exhibiting work done by kids in Tuvalu, work done by kids in the UK, and also screening the videos that were shot by the Red Cross Youth Group. Loads and loads of informal education. Then we did lots of eco-arts projects in Fiji. This one's around plastic pollution and looking after turtles. Again, we did puppet theatres and animation. And that's something that our students at BGU, Dan, I'm going to embarrass you now, yeah? he did some work around with Connor on animating climate change and looking at different ways to communicate climate change. And he's going to be working with the crew that have come over at the secondary schools festival to do some research around that as well. And it's him that's, for his project, who's doing the before and after survey to look at what impact these things have had on you that you're seeing at this conference. So any completed sheets, hand in to myself or Dan, and we'd be very grateful for that, thanks. So, we can see from the pictures, and just one example of Tuvalu, that there's been lots and lots of done about climate change awareness. One project that I ran was a very large project. It was in 15 different countries, and it was the European Union Global Climate Change Alliance project. It worked in 15 countries, on average 3 communities in each country, looking at the things that were demonstrated by the guys this morning, looking at vulnerability and adaptation assessment, drawing up adaptation plans, and then actually going as far as implementing some of the activities on those plans. Most of the activities were around water and food security. Almost all were water security, but I did manage to sneak one biogas project in there, because that's my personal thing. And within that, we did a lot of informal training at community level for helping people adapt. Yeah, we also developed the first toolkits that are then being further developed that you're using, and we also had a postgraduate education programme. So we set up postgraduate diploma in climate change, masters of climate change, PhD in climate change. Now the craziest thing is, this was the first ever project that allowed Pacific Island people to research climate change issues in their own communities and give them academic freedom and resources to do that. So it was quite an instrumental project, and as I say, its legacy is living on through what you guys are doing. And also, there was a German funded project called the CCCPIR, Coping with Climate Change in the Pacific Islands Region project. This project looked at integrating information and knowledge and skills around climate change into primary and secondary curricula, okay? And we even down to developing teaching resources. So, you can see there were lots and lots of efforts, but what was missing is formal education, as in a qualification, because basically qualifications are important. That's what we found out. You can do as much ad hoc training as you like, but when it comes to getting a job, you need a qualification. Just as an example of that, one of the guys that had been working with me since 2003 in Tuvalu on biogas, and had done every training that you can imagine, even gone to different countries to do training on biogas, had not got a single qualification in it, although he was extremely knowledgeable. When it came to applying for a job on one of the projects that was looking at biogas, the job was given to a guy who knew nothing about biogas, but he got a qualification in fitting solar panels. So this is how important qualifications are, okay? So we need formal education. So that's what we did with the EU PACTIVA project. That's the European Union Pacific Technical Vocational, Education and Training in Climate Change Adaptation and Sustainable Energy. It's quite a hefty title, so we'll just stick with the EU PACTIVA. And this was all about formalising training that happens after secondary school and before university. So technical, on the ground skills, knowledge that you can use in a community to increase your resilience, but also should hopefully improve your livelihood prospects as well, because you can then use it to get a job. Oops. We were also looking at that in terms of fitting in with a wide range of policy and strategies and all these things that are done internationally. So we've got the Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific. We've got also links with the Paris Agreement, that's to do with climate change and reducing emissions and putting in funding. Sandai Framework, this is one that it's not as popular, but it's massive. It's actually got more signatories in the Paris Agreement. The Sandai Framework is all about disaster risk reduction. It's a United Nations framework again. And we've looked at capacity building to achieve disaster risk reduction. Now in the Pacific, people tend to look at climate change as a slow and long-acting disaster. It's like a continuous event. So it ties in well with what's happening with education in the Pacific, and also helping people approve sustainable development goals, some of which are around education, some of which are around climate change, and some of which deal with disaster risk reduction. So it kind of ties in all those different things. So, on starting the EU TVEC project, we did a training, needs and gap analysis. Now we did that in all 15 countries. And the overriding thing that came out of this needs and gap analysis is the need for formal education. And in order to carry out education, you need trained teachers basically, you need people that can do that training. And unfortunately, on an island nation basis, a lot of trainers are missing. So we had a big training and trainers programme. Again, just to illustrate a personal story, from a village of a friend who was our in-country coordinator in Vanuatu at the time we did the training, needs and gap analysis. Cyclone Pam had literally ripped through Vanuatu and caused a lot of damage, caused fatalities. And we went in there to do this needs and gap analysis 6 weeks later. Now, the organisation that I was working for at the time was called the Pacific Community, and they'd been doing post-disaster assessment training for at least a decade. But again, you got a certificate of completion, you didn't actually get a qualification, right? So when it came to counting how many houses had blown down and how many people there were that you couldn't find and things like that, it was the people in the villages who were doing that, who had the training, weren't being taken seriously because they hadn't got a formal qualification. So the actual relief effort was slowed down by at least a week, while people from the Pacific Community went there to do the post-disaster assessment that the people in the village had already done, but the only difference was the people from Pacific Community had got a qualification. So this is key issue that came out of this, is that we need formally recognised qualifications and professionalisation of anything to do with climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So, leading on from that analysis, these are the things that the countries came up with. So, top of the lists were disaster risk management, agricultural food security, water security, photovoltaics, energy efficiency and project management. So all skills that are much needed. Now for the rest of the talk, I'm going to completely ignore sustainable energy. This is a massive project and we haven't got time to go into everything. I'm just going to focus on what we did for resilience. So these are the countries that the project was running in. And you may or may not know, when you go to university, everything's quality controlled, and it's controlled by Higher Education Authority, or whatever it calls itself this week. I don't know, it changes names regularly. But, so everything's quality controlled. You have benchmark statements, you have to have institutions that are validated and accredited, and it's a whole massive system. So when we look at this, right, we've got over the top there, like Marshall Islands, FSM, Palau, they all align to American standards. Over here, we've got a mix of Australia and New Zealand. We've got a bit of Scotland alignment in Fiji. We've got a bit of UK general alignment in Tuvalu. So it's basically anything goes as far as education is concerned. And only 5 of the 15 countries that we were working in had any kind of quality assurance for like education on a national level. But again, from the needs and gap analysis, people wanted training in country that was sustainable, delivered by local trainers, looking at local issues, delivered at local institutions. So we needed to find a way of accrediting the qualifications that we wanted to design and deliver. So we did that by using the Fiji Higher Education Commission, which I love their name, FEC. Makes me smile every time. So we developed certificates 1 to 4 on their education framework in climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, otherwise known as resilience, and we also developed sustainable energy qualifications. Right. The scary thing is, this was the first time ever that climate change and resilience have been addressed at a vocational level. But when you think of somewhere like, again, I'm going to use Tuvalu as an example, sorry, because we've got no Tuvaluans here, but anyway, they have 90% of people who have a job in Tuvalu are employed by the government, and 45% of them are employed on something to do with climate change or disaster risk reduction. So for small island states, it's a massive employment sector. So we sort of like defined it as an employment sector, and therefore we could do vocational education for that sector. We had, as I say, very kindly, we had ministerial representation from climate change departments, ministries of education, sustainable energy, and anything to do with disaster risk management. And we invited everybody to our big meetings, regional meetings, where we devised the qualifications. We had an online system where people could feed into developing the qualifications. I think Roy was a part of that as well. He was a member of our Industry Standards Advisory Committee. So it was a massive group effort to design these qualifications. And the education people weren't happy because they wanted to steadfastly have national qualifications. But the people that were at the sharp end of climate change realised that we needed these qualifications, so they really wanted to forge ahead and have regional validation of these qualifications. Again, this was a world first, the first time that qualifications had actually been recognised on a regional basis. So we had to develop all the policy and all that malarkey that goes with doing something like that, which was pretty tedious. So on a national level, we got support, and we wanted to develop capacity for them to deliver their priority training needs. And again, quality assurance on a regional level, on a national level if they got it. And we wanted to increase the number of validated institutions, so we had to develop a system of doing that on a regional basis as well. So this is basically the step-by-step approach that we took. We developed the qualifications on a regional level. We got those endorsed on a regional level. We aligned it to the Pacific Qualifications Framework. They extended their remit because prior to that they were only looking at school level qualifications, and now they're looking at tertiary level qualifications as well. We got approval to deliver the qualifications on a national level. On a national level, they were where systems are in place, they're endorsed on a national level, where not, we did it on a regional level. And then we eventually got to the point where we could award the qualifications. And yeah. So this is where we were working, levels 1 to 4 on this qualifications framework. So this is basically what you should know when you leave secondary school. And this is like a level 10 is your doctorate, okay? So that's how that works. We were fitting in at this level. So, we want to train teachers, blah, 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 blah. This is what the qualification looked like. So at levels 1 and 2, it's basic skills. And at levels 3 and 4, it verges out into the particular issues that have been highlighted from our original needs and gap analysis. We had a project gender strategy, which we managed to succeed because if we looked at TVET level education, one country statistics were they got 200 students in vocational education, but only 6 of them were female. So it's a very low bar. We managed to quite get over that quite a lot by having our gender strategy and having a positive approach to getting students engaged. And I should say another thing as well. What we did was a lady from Fiji Disabilities Forum did a lot of research. She was instrumental in doing our gender strategy. She did a lot of research around not only attitudes of students, but attitudes of like people in the village. Why, were they preventing girls from coming in? So we really, really dug deep on that strategy. So I say we created a resilience sector. So every sector, so you've got like Royal College of Engineers, Royal Institute of Geographers, etc. So we have the Pacific Regional Federation of Resilience Professionals. So that was our industry association. So when these projects fold, there's something left in place that can actually update the qualifications, revalidate the qualifications, and add any new skill sets into those qualifications. So these are our anticipated members for the Pacific Regional Federation. So we've got everything from individuals who are certified up to NGOs, government agencies and even like people who give you money to do this kind of thing. The functions are basically qualification accreditation, that's one of the most important, and certification of practitioners, along with a whole range of other stuff. So yeah, we think it was value met. When you're talking about this in Lincolnshire, I feel a bit bad, you know.
Yeah.
It's like the home of Brexit, you know. But it was great value for money for the EU taxpayer. So we developed the qualifications on a regional level, we got it accredited on a regional level, we defined a new sector for employment, and we invented we began professionalising that by inventing a federation. So what next? Well, what you guys have been talking about this morning. Our next thing is we're looking at putting in specific post-disaster and logistics modules, at levels 1 to 4. And that's going to be working with the PrEP, Pacific Resilience Project at SPC. Oops. And the work that we did on this project also went into this, which is the strategic approach to capacity development for implementing the Sendai framework on disaster risk reduction. So we've got references to support all the stuff. And any questions? Yeah.
Thanks. What was there much when it came to education? Was there much of a cultural exchange? So did you gain much from local traditions and local customs and traditional knowledge, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Traditional knowledge was built in. That was one of the things that was identified in all 15 countries. And it wasn't us going and doing it. It was Pacific Islanders designing their own qualifications. I was just making sure that the money was not spent unwisely, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, is it a model that could be applied to other regions in the world, like Africa, for example, or Latin America?
Yeah, we think so. That's why it's been integrated into this framework. So we're looking now at setting up a more global idea around the Pacific Regional Federation for Resilience Professionals, because that sector needs professionalising. And it's not, because like before we did this, you could only learn how to do a cost-benefit analysis at the University of the South Pacific at master's level. Well, that's no good, because people working in communities at community level need to be able to do a cost-benefit analysis on basic stuff that they're doing. So this kind of vocational level thing brings all that into play, Yeah.
What's your team outside the United Nations?
No, it's European Union.
Was there, is there scope for introducing this climate resilience modules more widely, like in the UK or other Western European or other, North America or wherever countries, or is this already being done?
No, none of it's been done. All of it is free. It's all like free educational resources on an open license for people to use. It's all available and online, and you could download it as a module. You can download the descriptors, the competency sets, everything like that. The teacher's guides, the student guides, everything's all a free resource if people wanted to use it.
But is there a gap in the market, in other words, for example, the UK to introduce this type of...
I don't know. I would imagine there is. Yeah, at one level, I would imagine there is. And the people at Public Health England are very interested in doing it. But again, it's getting backing for it. But it's there. It's a resource for people to use anywhere. And as I say, Sendai framework, which is global, they've kind of integrated those ideas into their framework. So hopefully it will become. Yeah, if you think about 15 countries, that's not a bad start. Yeah.
Thank you. Just springboarding off what you were saying, obviously in this country we've had people coming out of school to protest about climate change. So maybe it'd be worth looking at both the teachers and the students, and maybe doing like an optional accredited module, so that teachers can do it as part of their own continuing professional development. So they've got a bit of wine, so they can bring it in thematically, cross-curricular, whatever, can underpin that, and maybe a little something for the students as well.
Yeah.
vision similar, like formal, semi-formal, accredited way of looking at it.
Okay, I'd say great, I'd support that. I know loads of people in schools would support that. But would it be supported by the Ministry of Education, seeing as Michael Gove pulled climate change out of geography? You know, they're not going to pull climate change out of something on one hand and then on the other hand say, yeah, go and study it. Will they provide funding for that? I don't know. If they did, then yeah, it's a goer. If not, it all depends on funding.
Are you working with this sustainable education, environmental education schools?
Yeah, they came to our conference that we had in April, and yeah, we've got links with those now.
Because I think that's a good way.
It is, yeah, they were very, very interested in what we were doing. Yeah.
Could you get back to the references?
Yeah.
Sorry, you mentioned about vocational training. I know not currently, but a few years ago I was living in Scunthorpe, and there was a great talk there about opening these university technical colleges, which
Yeah.
will be 14 to 19. There's a great focus on developing wind farms, which was quite big in northern Lincolnshire. I wonder, is as part of whether there's scope for actually that kind of more technical vocational education also to include some of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we did all the stuff on sustainable energy as well. I mean, that was vast. I mean, we did all about wind power, biogas, small scale hydro, so micro hydro, a whole variety, different kinds of solar, a whole variety of technical qualifications, but they are more mainstream than, there's nothing on climate change adaptation that's framed around climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. But yeah, absolutely. But again, I would say I lived permanently in Fiji from 2011, and as I say, I was working in Tuvalu from 2003 to 2010, and around about 2010, that's when the legs started to be pulled from under any ideas around lifelong learning and education for free. So I know, like the Vaughan, I used to work at the Vaughan Centre at Leicester Uni. The place where I used to work got closed while I was away. So I don't know if there's the support for that there. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you find in the process of your project that you overcame some of those barriers that I think Charles mentioned earlier, like issues with it being such a complex subject, curriculum constraints and everything else? Did you find that they also melted away?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you're looking at it from a practical problem-solving basis, you have to work in a transdisciplinary way.
Yeah.
So, and Pacific people are used to using a whole range of skill sets and a range of ideas to solve problems, and they were the people designing the qualifications, so that all came in. Okay.
Can I just say on behalf of us all, thank you, Mark and Sarah, who were taking thinking about the way in which you gave the importance of education, a bit of theory, the importance of education, and we all know that education is important, but actually the importance of the qualifications and the formal systems that have to be embedded, as well as the tangible, immediate responses. And I think for me that's been very, very important to be able to say how that can come together and how we can sort of pursue that. So thank you very much.
I just need to make this comment. Sarah, just want to thank you. I see Tuvalu was one of my students. I feel I need to share with you is that we are now engaging with MEDC and Tibet through USB. We are taking education and educating our young people that we're doing the action today. And we are including